Welcome to another episode of the Scottsdale Vibes podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Haygood. I have a very special guest today, Dr. Scott Menzel of the Scottsdale Unified School District. That's kind of a tongue tie.
It's a long time.
It is. I'm really excited to talk with you, Dr. Menzel. We have so much to talk about it, so I'm kind of just going to jump into it. I feel like you need no introduction at this point. We are here. School starts this week. Thank goodness. I know I'm not the only parent out there that was excited to see summer leave. I hope you had a nice summer and got at least some of vacation. It's your third year here in the district. What are you excited about this year?
I'm excited about a lot of things. I'm excited to have our students back in session, in person. I'm excited because I think we're moving past the last 2 years of COVID disruption. Not that there won't be some issues that we have to attend to, but we're really moving back to the next post-pandemic phase for Scottsdale Unified School District. We're implementing the new strategic plan that the governing board approved on June 28th. And we're really looking forward to taking Scottsdale Unified School District to the next level.
What does the next level look like?
Well, our vision is engaging all students in world-class, future-focused learning. We expect that Scottsdale will compete not only with other districts in the Valley, but we'll be the best in Arizona and compete with school districts across the nation. And our students need to be prepared to compete with young people and leaders from around the world. So we have really high expectations for performance at all levels. So from preschool all the way through post-secondary, Scottsdale Unified School District is the place where your students can go from here to anywhere.
I love that. Let's talk a little bit about that since you kind of brought it up. Bringing the students up to the next level when it comes to academic expectations and excellence and stuff like that. What are some programs that Scottsdale is initiating? Some of the things, how are we rising the bar when it comes to academic acceptance here in Scottsdale?
So we have, it starts by understanding where our students are. Mm-hmm. And so in the fall, we do initial assessments, primarily in reading and math, to identify baseline data. And our goal is to ensure that not only do they make a year's worth of progress, but in many cases, we need to get more than a year's worth of progress, particularly for students who may be behind. Mm-hmm. And while we've seen a lot of progress related to the impact of the pandemic and kids who fell behind because of that, with summer learning and other specific and targeted interventions, we also know that every year when students come back, there's kind of differential gaps in their learning and where they are academically. Our teachers have the data then in order to be able to inform their instruction. And that's part of the academic focus, but then also setting our sights high. So it's not about just doing good enough, but it's really exceptional education in every aspect of what we do. Students need to be owners of their own learning, so this is not just something that's done to them, but they're actually active participants. They understand what they're learning, why they're learning it. We talk in the strategic plan about implementing problem-based or project-based learning, where they understand the relevance of what they're learning to the future. So really grounding that experience into something that's going to be meaningful for them in their lives. They understand the relevance of that. The learning is then cemented, and then it builds as they move through the system. As
someone who had a difficult time in school with test taking, that's where I excelled, was that project-based, real life learning. It was relatable to me, and that's, I appreciate that, because not everyone can read a book and learn it and then take a test on it. And I think that's important to really gravitate to the different learning environments that these students have. It's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to schools and the students.
Correct. Our vision is not to create world-class test takers. It's world-class, future-focused learners. And the way you demonstrate that learning, we do have to do tests. We do want our test scores to be competitive. That's important. It's one metric, but it's not the only. Mm-hmm. And so making sure that we're looking at multiple measures of progress along the academic journey is important.
It starts with our teachers, the classrooms, and everything like that. I do want to talk to you about something. The teacher turnover rate here is a little high this past year. I understand that we have one every year. That's normal. We have people retire, life situations moving, all of that. I understand that. I feel like teacher burnout has been higher than normal. I totally think that a lot of that has to do with COVID and how that happened. But we had an exceptionally high rate this year of turnovers from teachers, staff, administration, from the top down. What was that? What's causing it? And how are you looking to fix the problem?
Well, you've hit on a number of the variables that cause people to leave. So we probably had twice as many teachers retire as do in a normal year. And I do think that that's likely pandemic related.
Did you know that was coming? Was it expected? Because you know how long teachers have been here, so you can predict when they're going to retire.
I wouldn't say that it was a bubble where we knew they hit their time and they could go.
That's what I was asking, yeah.
And many of our teachers, even when they reach retirement eligibility, aren't ready to retire.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really a product, I think, of the environment that we were working in the last 2 years, and it became very stressful. Some of our teachers who would have worked a few more years said, I'm done. Mm-hmm. Some of them have said, we're going to come back and sub, and I'm really grateful for that. There are others who have moved because of family and other considerations. And there is, across the valley, so it's not unique to Scottsdale, there was a higher level of turnover, and finding people to fill positions has been a challenge not only for SUSD, but for our competitors in other school districts and not in the school district area. So if you, in our nutrition service program, for example, our food service workers, they can go and work at Culver's or McDonald's or Chick-fil-A making $15 an hour. They're getting signing bonuses. So we've had to retool the incentives that we're providing and the compensation we provide to try to attract and retain talent from a pool where we've got other non-school-based employers that are competing for the same group of people.
Well, you brought it up, so I'll just kind of head there. Teacher pay, we're known here in Arizona for having one of the lowest funded education systems and stuff like that. And you're right, these fast food restaurants or other restaurants and businesses, they are paying more. How are you competing? How are you stepping up? And where is this coming from?
So there's good news in the sense that the budget that was approved and the governor signed does increase funding for schools. The amount that SUSD will receive is predicated on our average daily membership. So we're estimating a minimum of $7 million more. It could be higher if we have more students. And we'll be able to use that money to help increase compensation for employees at all levels. So it won't get us to be in the top 10% of states in terms of teacher compensation, but it does allow us to take meaningful steps towards compensation that helps us attract and retain talent.
When it comes to attracting and retaining talent, some of the positions I've heard that are really hard to fill are like special education, the health department, the nurses. How are we getting qualified teachers, number one, and what are you doing to retain them? Because we can only give them so much, and like you said, they can go to other states if they're allowed to, if they're capable of going to get paid more.
So in the special education arena, we had, prior to this past year, $2,000 that we paid for an incentive for some of our special education classroom instructors. We've increased that by another $5,000, so teachers can get up to $7,000 more if they're teaching in a self-contained special education classroom. That's one strategy. Other school districts are doing the same thing. So we're all competing for a limited pool of people who have proper credentials. Part of our challenge is getting people who choose to go through special education programs at the university level and work in that arena. It's not an easy job, and so if we can't increase the pipeline, that scarcity principle is still going to apply because every school district's looking for special educators. And so one of the things that we talk about in the strategic plan with respect to attracting and retaining talent is how do we become the premier employer in the Valley?
Yeah.
This is a place where people want to work because we have a healthy culture, a culture that respects and values professionals, a culture that understands that there needs to be some level of work-life balance. We have high expectations for ourselves and for our students, but we want to do that in a way that is supportive of the individual so that it's healthy. Not the kind of stress that we saw in the first 2 years of the pandemic.
Well, that led into my next question, teacher morale. I mean, I hope you understand this, and I think you do. It's low. It is low, and feeling when you work in a classroom, you have teachers and you have staff around you, but you really are alone with 25 plus kids, depending on the grade level, by yourself all day. What are you hearing from the teachers and staff, and what are you doing to help them feel important, loved, cared for, and appreciated, most importantly? Because I think they're amazing, and I do not want to do what they do, I'll be honest.
They are phenomenal, and I would say that there are a number of things that are in the pipeline. One of our initiative implementation teams, again coming out of strategic planning process, is innovation in teaching and learning. And we have a number of things that we're talking about based on research where we can restructure how time is used within our 5-day, full day for kids eventually, because we have some early release days. In the future, I think we can restructure how we use time that frees up time for teachers during the normal work week so that they're not spending time evenings and weekends doing that work. If we can do that, and the goal is to free up 20% of their time so that they can do that during the workday, and then modify how we're engaging students in meaningful learning activities from, if you're at Laguna in the STEAM program, there's an artist in residence. What a great opportunity for students to learn, or utilization of the makerspace that's there. We have opportunities for our middle school and high school students to have experiences outside of the school, and internships, externships, getting mentoring experiences. There are so many different things that we can do to make the learning relevant and meaningful, restructure how we use time so that it eases some of the burden on our teachers. The other thing is the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at Arizona State University has been working on the Next Gen Workforce Project, thinking about how we do education differently.
It's really interesting. I was reading into that. So tell me a little bit more about what they're doing with that.
So it's fundamentally based on the medical model, that it's teams of people, not individuals, who do this work. And so if you think about it in an elementary level, if you have a team of 3 teachers, one of them might be really good at mathematics instruction, and that person can take the lead. You know, you share the workload and the responsibility. If one person's out, you don't miss a beat because the team knows all of the students, and then you're bringing in some other support as necessary. It could be paraprofessionals in the classroom. It could be community volunteers. There are a lot of different ways to harness available community resources in that teaming structure so that teachers aren't alone on an island. That's particularly important for new teachers. When you graduate from school, if you get put in a classroom and you're all alone and you're trying to figure out how to manage the instructional environment, you have demand for evidence that kids are learning, and you're trying to balance all of those things, and maybe a mentor comes in once in a while to give you support. That is something that results in teachers washing out in the first 3 years of the profession. The effort at ASU is really focused on how do we create a structure where in a teaming environment, you're supported as you enter the profession. So I think that there are opportunities in our innovation in teaching and learning initiative implementation team to really do some things that are unique here in Scottsdale that will make us an attractive place for people to work.
When it comes to that, I think that's a great idea, because especially when you come to like the elementary school age, I mean, that's one teacher. When you get up to like the middle school, high school, you're teaching one subject. It's the same amount of kids, I know that, and they probably have a little bit more opinionated than things than my elementary student. But to have those extra hands and eyes, you know, and help in the classroom, would those be more certified teachers? Would it be they have to have a special degree? Have you gotten that far in the thinking process of what kind of certification or anything they would need to be in the classroom?
So there are a lot of different ways to structure it. We have to have a certified teacher or teachers responsible for the overall cohort of students.
Okay.
But you can have paraprofessionals who do a pull-out with a group of kids on a particular project and provide that support for 5 or 7 students. And you can group and regroup based on what students are working on, based on interest, based on where they are. So if you've got a group that's advanced, you can maybe move them in a different way than if you have some that are trying to catch up. So teaching to the middle has always been problematic because the students who already understand the content get really frustrated. They oftentimes will act out as a result. Students who are behind feel overwhelmed and sometimes just give up, so they'll act out. So figuring out effective ways to differentiate instruction and doing that collaboratively rather than having each teacher being expected to do it is part of the next gen workforce approach. We've not yet officially joined that cohort, but that's one of the things that we're looking at. Okay. We're interested in learning from other districts there. And then we've got some things that we've been contemplating that are not a part of their model, but in talking with the Dean of the College of Education, they'd be very interested in working with us and piloting those ideas as well.
You did a visit to the schools, which I love. You know, you are very involved, you're seen, you're heard, and I appreciate that from you. One thing that I've heard from parents from multiple schools, honestly, is they feel like the lack of communication is happening from the top down. I've talked to a couple teachers, and some of these are like the after-school care program is through a separate company, right? That comes through. Not company is not the right word, but are they part of SUSD? Like the
community education is part of the district, but it's a separate department.
Thank you. what are we going to do? And I say we because I'm very much a part of this community and this school district and stuff like that, to be heard, to keep information flowing. At one point, you'll have those weekly emails going out, which I loved. We've gone down to monthly, I believe. You have a website link that has where you can, write questions in. You are responsive and stuff like that. The teachers still feel like, I don't know what's going on from the top down. Sometimes I'm just going day by day and doing what I need to do to make sure my kids learn. Have you heard this? What are we working on? Talk to me, communicate with me, Dr. Menzel.
So I will, and so let's talk real about communication.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street. There is a lot of information that goes out, even to our staff. Every week we have teacher talk, we have admin inbox, and we have classified connection. I'm trying to remember the names of the three newsletters are, but we have those that go out to our staff every week with volumes of information. How many people actually read it?
Yeah.
So we use multiple methods of communication. I wish more people would read. When we sent out the weekly communication to our families, there were people who really appreciated that, and there were others who never opened it. Mm-hmm. The source is intended to be able to give even a broader picture of all the great things that are happening. We do have, I'm able to write a blog at the beginning that really kind of talks about what the important topics are, with links to some of the other highlights, but it's designed so that where your level of interest is. So if you have a student in middle school or high school and you're interested in sports, there's going to be an area for you. If you're an elementary parent, you might have different interests. And so we want to make sure that we're providing information to people where they need it. We do communicate. I send a weekly email to all of the staff from me that identifies any number of things of importance, and that will continue. So again, if people read it, they have access to a lot of information. And through Let's Talk, there's a way for our parents and for our staff and for our community members to ask questions, to make suggestions, provide comments. They can do that anonymously, or they can do it as a hidden customer, or they can just do it as themselves. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, we're committed to transparency. We're committed to continuous improvement. We know that teaching is difficult. We know that in this environment, we've seen behaviors that we didn't see pre-pandemic, so we're continuing to work to provide support there. When you're short-staffed, whether it's bus drivers, paraprofessionals, and teachers, all of those impact the learning environment. And so creating healthy cultures on all 29 campuses is part of our commitment, and having two-way communication that's open and honest is part of our core value.
I agree with that. You brought it up, so I'm just going to go there. It was later on I was going to ask you about this, but I know this is a nationwide problem, and I say I know it's nationwide because I have friends that work in the school district that have for 15 plus years in different states. And they're all saying the same thing. Kids are acting up. We're having behavioral issues we have not seen in years, if ever, in the school districts, from bullying to weapons to, other issues. What is going on? Is this what we're starting to see, some side effects from the kids not being in school and stuff like that? How are we handling it? Because it's been issues in some schools in the district.
Well, there's no question that much of it's related to the impact of the pandemic. Schools shutting down abruptly in March of 2020, and then the fits and starts as you tried to figure out, are we open or are we not? We opened very quickly for elementary students. There was 1 month of virtual, and then we came back to in person. But all of us were learning. We didn't know, that from the Delta variant to the Omicron variant to, all of the things that we were learning from public health. That's not a part of what anyone went to school for. For our kids, there's a lot of uncertainty. There was differential impact. Some children lost parents. They lost grandparents. They lost family members to COVID. There are others who lost their jobs, and so there's an impact on what's going on in your family life when you're looking at these other impacts of the pandemic. So kids acting out and behaving differently absolutely is impacted by what happened early on in the pandemic. And what I've heard many administrators and teachers say is they've just forgotten how to behave in community with other people.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's part of our job. We need to create learning environments that help students understand how to navigate in community with other children. When we talk about social-emotional learning, we talk about the behavioral aspect of learning. Again, it's a core part of what we do. There are some people who've said, well, no, you can't do social-emotional learning because that's critical race theory. It's not, just to be clear. It's why it's so important. We focus on the whole child, their health and well-being, their ability to engage in constructive and meaningful relationships with other people, some who have similar interests and some who have very different interests. And we take everyone from all walks of life, they come into our school systems, and our job is to create a welcoming environment where they all feel a sense of belonging. Some need more support than others, and that's part of the challenge we've had. Just because someone misbehaves, it doesn't mean they're a bad child. But sometimes they make bad choices. Sometimes it's an indicator of something else that needs attention, and that's part of our job, is to identify what supports do the students need, how do we provide it, how do we support our teachers in that, so that everyone can be successful in the classroom academically, socially, emotionally, and thrive in our learning environments.
I mean, I remember growing up in elementary school and we had school counselors in our elementary school. They would come into our classroom once a month, put on a presentation about whatever is geared towards that age group in elementary school. We could go see them privately. I had private meetings with my counselor, when tough times came up. Why don't we have that here in our elementary school age and up? And do we have school counselors in every single school? Why isn't there one?
So we have social workers in every school.
Okay.
That perform that function. The state provided supplemental funding, so we were able to hire one for every building. We have counselors at the middle school and the high school level. And so we've provided some of that support to address those issues. In looking at last year's data, the most frequently requested support for group instruction in this area was for work on kindness. Simple, what we might think is a simple thing, but look at the community around us. Look at the nature of even the political discourse. It's not kind. Mm-hmm. It's not respectful. We should be able to have differences of opinion, but do that civilly. How the adults model is what the kids are going to pick up. And so oftentimes students are bringing to the classroom what they've seen outside the classroom. And so I would call on our community to think more intentionally about the way we engage in civil discourse versus some of the negative vitriol that gets to elevated levels and creates a very rigid us versus them mentality. Mm-hmm. We're all occupying the same space together. We have different backgrounds, different experiences, different beliefs. But I think when it comes to the education of our children, we have a common objective, and that is we want each one to be successful.
You talk about the political discourse, and my child's in elementary school. He came home in kindergarten telling me that he had a political discussion with a classmate at the age of 6, and I was just flabbergasted. And I realized, you don't realize what your kids are listening to sometimes, especially I'm still in the young age. And I really got upset with myself because I wasn't paying close enough attention that he even knew what was going on. And so I do understand, and kindness is crazy that's not how we lead our life right now. I've been on the receiving end of that as an adult as well, and we could all use some kindness in life.
Absolutely.
Let's end right there. I want to take a short break. I am so not done with you. We are just getting started. I want to come back and I really want to talk about funding and some of the things that have passed over the summer and what next year looks like. So stay. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm sitting here with Dr. Scott Menzel, SUSD School Superintendent. All right, let's talk money. I mean, I know it's kind of a taboo topic, but we really got to talk about it. In Arizona, we are ranked very low in the nation on funding. I want to talk about the voucher extension that was passed over the summer. Explain a little bit about that. How is that going to affect our public school system?
So the net impact is yet to be determined. But essentially, Arizona has had a limited ESA opportunity for families to take the money and use that at a school of their choice. The expansion that was approved would allow anyone to use it, so it opens the door for public money to go into private schools. Parents can make that choice now.
So before, was it like if your kid had a special need, and I'm not talking special education, but excelled at one subject, so you wanted to go to this school to kind of pick up on their special skills or something like that, that's what it was for originally, and now anyone can?
Well, I'm not familiar with all of the requirements to qualify.
Okay.
That's one of the things that it didn't impact us a lot, but with the universal expansion and anyone can use it, that's a different conversation. So if you're already sending your child to a parochial school and now you can take advantage of the ESA, there's money that's moving from the public pot into a private environment. And there's limited money, and as you said, we're already one of the lowest funded states. Mm-hmm. We're grateful for the increase in funding, and I appreciate the bipartisan approach to passing the budget this year. I think that should happen more often. With the universal ESA expansion, There is a risk to public schools when the money moves from your traditional district school into, in particular, private. I mean, charter schools still get state funding, but the money can go to private and parochial schools in a way that it didn't used to in the past. That could be an issue for us in terms of overall enrollment, and we're driven by average daily membership, so the number of students we have is really what creates our baseline funding. So there's a potential risk, but I would argue that that's not what keeps me up at night. Our goal at Scottsdale Unified School District is to be the first choice and a premier educational opportunity. People should be beating down the door to attend Scottsdale Unified School District. So we believe that in this open marketplace that we should be able to compete with anyone in order to provide exceptional educational experiences for our students.
What about the district additional assistance override that's coming up on the November ballot?
Well, that's really important for the district. When you think about school funding in Arizona, it's extraordinarily complicated.
Yes, that's why I'm asking you explain it.
If I spent time talking about all of the things, your eyes would glaze over, your listeners would fall asleep, and if they're driving, that would be dangerous. But we have a maintenance and operating portion of our budget. That is what primarily funds our staff. Then we have capital funding, district additional assistance. The state provides funding in DAA. In both of those buckets, there's an opportunity for communities to supplement the funding that we get that's authorized by the state. So you can do an M&O override and you can do a district additional assistance override. That's capital. Oftentimes when people hear capital, they think buildings, but in this case, it's a lot broader than just buildings. It's furniture, it's fixtures, it's athletics, it's playgrounds.
Technology.
It's technology. In fact, technology is a big component here. In the pandemic, we pivoted to a one-to-one environment. Sustaining that requires the ability to replace technology for 22,000 students on a frequent basis. So the district additional assistance override provides us the resources to be able to continue investing in curriculum, technology, playgrounds, facilities, and equipment. Not on the big ticket items. That's a bond, right? If you're going to build a new elementary school, if you're going to do some of those other things, you have a bond to do those things. District additional assistance override covers the things that, might 2 to 5 year lifespan, but really important for keeping us on the cutting edge of teaching and learning. When we decided to put this on the ballot, there was a question about how much should we ask for. For the median priced home in Scottsdale, it's just over $48 a year or $4 a month. The overall amount that we would be able to generate is capped at $14.5 million. That's an increase over the 2016 capital override, which was at $8.5 million.
Okay.
If you think about the impact of inflation,
right.
Most of us have experienced it directly and personally in many different ways. You think about the supply chain issues, the cost of everything has gone up significantly. And so when we think about the district additional assistance override and the 7-year lifespan, back in 2016 there was no calculation for inflationary pressures on either the bond issue or the capital override. What we did in putting together the proposal that's in front of the voters in November is to anticipate that over the next 7 years, we're going to still see some inflationary pressures. So we tried to find a reasonable increase that would also account for anticipated inflationary impact in the future.
I get it now. So vote for it is what you're saying to get more money for the schools.
Well, I can't say that, but you can.
So there are some people out there who argue that the school district actually does have plenty of money. It's how it's allocated, it's who gets it, who doesn't get it. What do you have to say to that?
So let's be clear. I never start with money as the operating principle. I start by saying, how are we using the money that we have to maximum impact? And we continue to look at that all of the time in terms of how we've allocated it. But to be clear, we have somewhere between 2,600 and 2,700 full-time employees. We're not able to pay competitive rates to attract and retain top talent in many of those positions. 80% of our budget, maybe a little bit higher, is in employee compensation. We focus on putting as much of that money in the classroom as possible. But it's the supports. If you don't pay for transportation, if you don't pay for security, if you don't pay for food service workers, you're not going to be able to operate your buildings. You've got to have the staff to do all levels of meeting the compliance, state and federal requirements. So there's a role for the people that we have. We continually evaluate and reevaluate what positions are needed, what might have been here because they were needed in the past but aren't needed now. When we have vacancies, we reassess, do we need to fill that position or do we need to restructure it? Like any business, we're looking at how we can operate as effectively and efficiently as possible with the resources we have. But if you want to address the issue of class size, how big is too big? What's the target number? What happens if you have 5 more kids in the 4th grade? So one teacher's now got 35 or 40 students and the rest are at 30. You know, it's at some point when you think about how you're balancing that, what that means, our class size issues are impacted. For every 1 student reduction in class size, it's about $1 million.
Wow.
When you take it across 22,000 kids.
Yeah.
Right, so when you go to scale, to be able to do that, it's a challenge. And then in this environment, we're struggling to find just enough certified teachers to fill all of the classrooms. So I would argue that we don't have enough money to pay our professionals what they need and deserve to be paid. Many of them can't afford to live in Scottsdale and work here. That's another issue, and with the price of gas, the further you are, you might take a job in a school district closer to where you live just so that you're not paying the gas prices. So we have a lot of economic pressures. We are a $400 million enterprise. And that sounds like a lot of money to people, but we employ a lot of people. We're one of the largest employers in Scottsdale, and what we do, I think, is incredibly important in terms of preparing the next generation.
The teachers got a raise last year, right? I feel like of like $3,500.
It was a 3%.
Okay.
Everyone got at least 3%. Some people saw more, depending on what we had worked with our associations on wage compression, and then there's a supplemental adjustment that will likely be approved as well, related to the new money that we have coming from the state.
How, I mean, okay, I'll take that.
But if inflation is at 8.5% and your pay raise was 3%,
right, it doesn't.
Where's the other 5.5 coming from?
I'm with you. My mom was in education for 34 years before she retired, and then went back, you know, kind of thing. And so I went through this all with her growing up, you know, the 1.5% she'd get a year, 2.5%, 3%, you know, and she went back to get her master's just to get a 1% raise, you know, kind of thing. And I think that's what we forget is like the sacrifices these teachers make. Like, how can the state get more money to compensate them and bring them in, you know, to retain them and stuff like that?
Even state employees got a 10% increase this year.
So why? How is that happening?
Well, the legislature appropriates, the governor signs, and Arizona is in a fortunate position to have had a healthy budget surplus this past year. There are ongoing conversations politically with respect to how much money the state should have. You know, it's the balance of reducing taxes, maintaining taxes, increasing taxes. What's the public good? And that's a political conversation, and there should be robust discussions about it. But if you want to think about ensuring that Arizona is prepared to thrive in the future, if you don't have quality public education, you're going to impact the value of homes. You're going to impact the ability of employers to choose Arizona as a place to locate. It's a wonderful place to be, but if you can't find talented workers, it doesn't matter. And so when you think about the connection between education, workforce development, and economic development, there's an important investment to be made. And I think that's the conversation that needs to continue as we head into November and as we think about education policy in the future.
You had the board just approve your renewal. There's a little controversy over that, how some feel like you got pushed through before your term was up and all that. Talk to me a little bit about that. And with that, though, what are your future goals? You know, you are going to be here for a few more years. What are we going to get out of you, Dr. Menzel?
So I would argue that it wasn't controversial at all. So someone suggested that, you know, you should wait till after the election. I would just do a little math exercise here. There are 5 people on the governing board. There are 2 seats up for election. Will there be a turnover of the board in November? There could be 2 new members, and there will be 2 new members because the 2 incumbents aren't running again. It's called 5-finger math. There's still 3 people. So there's not a turnover of the board, so it wasn't preempting anything. And in fact, the way it works as a superintendent, I've never worked the last year of a contract. It's customary to extend a contract before that last year, because what it signals is, we have confidence in the leadership, we have confidence in the direction that we're moving. And if there's not confidence, that's a signal to me that I should be looking for another opportunity. My commitment to Scottsdale is unwavering. I think this is a place that has the potential to be world-class. And I am grateful that the governing board made the decision to extend my contract, because I think in Scottsdale, leadership churn has been part of the problem. Since Dwayne was the superintendent from 1986 to 1996. Since Dwayne, there have been 13 different people who have been superintendent and had that title in this district.
But what does that say about our district that we're having such a high turnover rate?
We have a lot of churn. We have churn on governing board. We have churn in the superintendency, in part because there are competing political pressures and everybody wants to do things very quickly.
Okay.
If you compare with Paradise Valley pre-pandemic, they had 2 superintendents in 20 years. Each served 10 years. They had board members that served multiple terms. So you had leadership continuity. If you have leadership continuity, you can not only start an initiative, but you can see it through. Research says it takes 3 to 5 years, whether it's at the building level or the district level, to see the impact of the leader and the leader's decisions. For me, this is not about me or my decisions. This is about us. It's about the future we're creating together for the benefit of our students. And so that's why I'm interested in being here. I'm grateful for the new 3-year contract. In an ideal world, I would be here 10, just like Dwayne.
I like that. Well, speaking of, getting a new contract for 3 more years, this is probably one of the first years you are post-pandemic and we can really focus on something that's not related to the pandemic. What do you want to see out of Scottsdale for the next 3 years? Because you kind of had been in a fight or flight kind of mode for these first 3 years that you've been in office.
Well, so I'd like to give a shout out to our staff who stayed with us through the pandemic. They worked under the most trying of circumstances, and so a standing ovation for them and the fact that they're still here, absolutely.
How about a pay raise? I'm just going to throw it out there.
Again, the more we can work with our elected officials to properly fund public education, the more we'll be able to do that, because that's the right thing to do. So I would also say that while our test scores are only one indicator, when you compare Scottsdale Unified with other districts in the Valley and across the state, we didn't see the dramatic drops in achievement that some of our neighboring districts did.
Okay.
So I would argue that in spite of the pandemic, we held our own. We didn't grow as much as we would like, and there are areas that we want to make a priority. So if you think about middle school and high school math, those are things that I've flagged publicly at governing board meetings. And so those are things that we'll be intentional about. How do we provide support for the teachers, figure out where our students are, and how do we increase their level of success in mathematics? But it's really about all of our academic areas. It's about creating meaningful learning opportunities for our students. We want to be able to attract students back who left previously. Mm-hmm. And we want to support our building principals, because the culture and climate in every building is what will create the confidence in our parents to choose SUSD.
I totally agree with that. What is our school year looking like for this year when it comes to enrollment numbers and teachers and stuff like that?
So it's always difficult to predict. So we ended last year with just under 22,000 students enrolled in K-12. Over the summer, there's a fair amount of churn. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we know about it, sometimes we don't. There's also, and churn goes both ways. We have people who move into the community. I know that we hired an assistant principal who has 2 students who are enrolling in one of our elementary schools. It's always great when our employees bring their kids with them. And so August is really the time where we begin to see the whites of their eyes and see how many are actually in our schools. Yeah. But average daily membership is something that gets counted over time, and so the 40-day count and the 100-day count are signature spots for us. And so we won't know for sure, but we'll have a good sense of at least what our starting point is after the first couple of weeks of school.
What is something that does keep you up at night, since you mentioned earlier that, some things do and some, what's keeping you up at night right now? So
over the summer, we spent a lot of time thinking about safety and security. What happened in Uvalde is something that we never want to happen in Scottsdale. Many security measures have been put in place as a result of the bond issue, as a result of prior planning, we have a solid structure. But we spent time this summer working with Scottsdale Police Department and our staff here to really review our buildings, our security protocols, our vulnerabilities, and thinking through, are there other things that we can and should be doing to minimize the potential? We can't eliminate all risk, but we want to minimize the potential of something like what happened in Uvalde happening here. And that requires all of us to be engaged in ways that may be different. We talk about if you see something, say something. Social media often provides some early warning indicators. We want to create nurturing environments where everyone feels a sense of belonging. When you look at some of the school shootings, these are kids who are marginalized or isolated. They may have mental health issues. So we're concerned about mental health issues and access to guns. So we have a very comprehensive threat assessment protocol to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to identify early warning indicators. But we also need to follow the protocols that are put in place. We don't prop doors, don't prop gates. Sign in when you come in, make sure you're wearing the proper badge so we know that you have gone through the proper protocol. If we all do that together, we can enhance the security for our students. We've got a great partnership with Scottsdale Police Department. We work well with the Phoenix Police Department, but they're just pretty big and overwhelmed, and they serve Arcadia and Ingleside. But those relationships are critical. What's most important is the connection we have with our kids and with our families, and making sure that the security protocols we put in place are supported by everyone and people understand why they're there. That's something that keeps me up at night.
I agree, it keeps me up at night too, so thank you for that. Before we leave, we'll leave, because I don't want to leave on that note, I want to leave on a positive note. What keeps you up at night that's something positive that you're excited to look forward to for this school year?
For me, Scottsdale represents the unique opportunity where there's not a ceiling. We have really talented professionals. We have an engaged community. When parents are engaged, students are successful. We have access to resources. Historically, over time, this community has generously supported Scottsdale Unified. That is of immeasurable value, and I hope it continues into the future, because that investment allows us to pour into our students so they can achieve their full potential. What I love seeing is student success in the classroom, student success on the performance stage, student success in athletics, and ultimately where they go from here. So this past year we celebrated 125 years of educational excellence. We're going to continue to celebrate our legacy of success and featuring students who have gone from Scottsdale to anywhere, world changers in every industry imaginable. And we want to be able to tell those stories as inspiration to our current group of students about what's possible for them.
Well, the future is endless for these students. I'm very encouraged by hearing you talk and really just for the school year to start, mainly because summer was long and I don't want my kids back in school. They love school. My kids love school, and I'm very thankful for that. I encourage everyone out there to please talk to your teachers, talk to your students about, your kids, about being kind, like Dr. Menzel said. And if you want more information, always visit susd.org. Anything and everything that you need could be on there. Reach out to your principals, your teachers, anyone. I know my school is very communicative, and when I reach out, I always get a response. I think we also need to remember that while you may get a response, it may not be what you're looking for. It doesn't mean that they don't care, and I think that's where we have to work on things as well. So best of luck to you this year. I have 2 to worry about. You have 22,000 kids to worry about. Again, very thankful to all of our teachers and staff out there, and best of luck in an amazing 2022-2023 school year.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk this afternoon.